Welcome to FO Talks. With me is James Dorsey. He's a senior fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore. He's also the author of The Turbulent World. It's a Substack column. He's a noted author, journalist, scholar, academic of sorts, and a lover of football. And few people understand the Middle East better than James. James, welcome.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
James, let's get stuck in. The World Cup is on. We'll have a longer discussion on the World Cup. You and I both love football. I played football once upon a time very badly with little ability and much enthusiasm. And we have timelines on the World Cup. But today, we are not discussing football, which is a cheerier subject. Today, we are discussing Qatar, and we are going to, on Wednesday, 24th of June, it's morning in Europe. I'm in Vienna today, and James is in Singapore. It's evening in Singapore, afternoon, evening. We are going to make sense of Qatar's situation in the US-Israel-Iran war. James, what exactly is going on in Qatar? There has been an attack. Few people have died. And why that matters. Over to you.
Well, first of all, Qatar matters because it is one of, if not the largest gas producer in the world. Moreover, it shares the world's largest offshore gas field with Iran. So by definition, it has a different relationship with Iran than any of the other Gulf states. And of course, it has a history of successful mediation of conflicts, including mediation with Iran. So for the Qataris, it was a phenomenal surprise that they were going to be a target. And they're a target for the second time. Keep in mind that in June of last year, during the 12-day Israeli-Iranian war, the Israelis attacked Hamas, which was gathering in Doha to discuss an end to the Gaza war. It attacked them. It was the first time ever. And it was also the first time that, to a degree, the U.S. defense shield didn't work. Now, that is to say that the Americans were only notified the the Qataris of the attack minutes before it, and again the Iranians the Israelis gave some advance warning because they wanted to limit casualties. Fast forward to today, in this war, the Iranians hit the Ras Laffan gas facility. That is the world's largest gas facility. 17% of its production capacity was taken out. The estimates are that Qatar will lose $20 billion a year in revenues as well as in cost of repairing the facility. And that repair could take anywhere up to 5 years. So it's a very significant blow. Qatar excused itself in the initial phases of all of this, or recused itself from playing a mediating role because it was a target of the Iranians. Ultimately, the Qataris played a very important role in supporting Pakistan in mediating what is now the Memorandum of Understanding. We have had in the last few days an explosion at a gas facility in Qatar. It's not clear. The indications are that this was not an attack, but a locally caused explosion. We don't know what that explosion, what caused that explosion, but it did cost a number of casualties.
So, James, there are two more things to Qatar that you haven't mentioned. One, of course, that it hosted the previous World Cup very successfully, and that added to its soft power. And second, that Qatar funds Al Jazeera, which is the only rival to the BBC for worldwide coverage and worldwide audience that exists. So Qatar plays an outsized role, not just in diplomacy, not just in energy markets, but also when it comes to the narrative, or what some would say, the war of narratives around the world. Why did Iran hit Qatar? And indeed, one can figure out why Israel hit Qatar, because of course they wanted to kill Hamas members. But why did Iran hit Qatar, and how does that change the geopolitics of the Middle East?
Before I answer your question, let me just say something about the World Cup, which is relevant to all of this. Hosting the World Cup was part of a Qatari strategy that was not simply about soft power. Essentially, and that also connects to why Al Jazeera exists. And that was that the former emir of Qatar, the current emir's father, Sheikh Hamad, basically looked at Kuwait in 1990, 1991. And what he saw was the world rallying to the defense of Kuwait and to the expulsion of Iraqi occupation forces. Qatar is a state of 300,000 citizens.
Correct.
As a matter of principle, in terms of conventional warfare, I'm not talking about cyber warfare, information wars, but in terms of conventional warfare, there's no way that this country can defend itself against a superior enemy. And therefore, soft power was a defense strategy, or a security strategy, if you wish. Now, that to some degree will have changed with the current with the current war. Soft power would not have saved Qatar from Iranian attacks and missile attacks. It took an anti-air defense missile system. Obviously, the American military presence and the American military support. But nonetheless, the Qatari armed forces performed well. So in some ways, you can argue the World Cup strategy has proven itself. In some ways, you can argue that it's also shown its limits. So I think that's one aspect. At the same time, the founding of Al Jazeera was part of that strategy. What Al Jazeera did was essentially break the mode of state-controlled media in the Middle East and North Africa. To be fair, the Al Jazeera is state-owned. It's state-funded. I'm sorry. It's state-funded and is at times slower in reporting on domestic issues that don't reflect well on Qatar, or doesn't report on them at all. But in a lot of ways, it's put together a world-class 24-hour news broadcast that competes with the likes of the BBC or CNN or whoever else you would want to compare it with. Now, coming back to your question, why did Iran attack Qatar? It attacked all 6 Gulf states, including Oman, with which it has a close relationship, or a very good relationship, with which it shares the Strait of Hormuz in terms of territorial waters. Oman is a country that was mediating between the United States and Iran. So you would think that those would be reasons not to attack Qatar. But I think that the Iranians, from their perspective, basically were all inclusive in their attacks, even if some Gulf states like the United Arab Emirates were more heavily targeted than others, including Qatar. um, but nonetheless to create the pressure that Iran was able to create on global energy markets, on the Gulf states, it probably figured that it needed to be universal in attacking the Gulf.
So, as I see it, for Iran, this was a strategy really of hitting American bases, hitting production sites, not just of energy, i.e., oil and gas, but also aluminium, etc., and causing a supply side shock to the global economy, ratcheting up inflation in the Western world, particularly and including the US, which is a little more isolated, and thus causing enough pain to the invaders to stop. That makes sense. Now, what? How has this attack affected Qatar? What next? What do we expect going forward? Because Qatar not only faces the threat of Iran, but right now people are forgetting that Qatar also faces a threat from Saudi Arabia. After all, Saudi Arabia blockaded Qatar not too long ago. So, what next for Qatar?
Well, first of all, I mean, let's look at the geography.
Yes,
Qatar
very important. Yeah.
Qatar's a tiny state sandwiched between two frenemies, if you wish, Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia and Iran, and it always needed to maneuver. And as a result, its strategy was to have good relations with everybody, including those that were outcasts globally. Qatar has a particular problem because it is a gas producer. So, and it is totally dependent on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. Very quickly, if I can tell our viewers, Qatar is on the eastern side of Saudi Arabia. It is on the Persian Gulf. It is north of the UAE. It is south of Bahrain. Yes, Qatar can ship oil through pipelines if it wants to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. But Saudi Arabia hasn't proved to be a particularly reliable neighbor and friend. So Qatar is really a prisoner of geography. Over to you, James.
Well, the issue here is not oil. The issue is gas.
Yes, exactly. My apologies.
And
Yeah.
no, it's a very significant difference.
It's a big difference. You're right. And Qatar supplies Italy, Qatar supplies UK, Qatar supplies India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Qatar is hugely important in the global supply chain, and the downstream stuff, whether it is helium and other stuff, all the different gases. Qatar is supremely important there too. Over to you.
But the point I'm trying to make is, you can circumvent the Strait of Hormuz if you're exporting oil through pipelines. That is much more difficult to do with gas. And therefore, Qatar's dependence on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz is far greater than that of most other Gulf states. I mean, already Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have pre-existing alternative routes. The pipeline that goes to in the UAE to the port of Fujairah.
Yes.
That's being expanded, on top of which the UAE is planning more ports along its eastern borders or coastal waters to ultimately have no dependency whatsoever on the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia has been able to export some 7 million barrels a day pumped from its eastern oil fields to the western port of Yanbu. Those options aren't readily available for Qatar. So Qatar has a particular interest in getting shipping back through the Strait of Hormuz. It's the only Gulf state that is publicly not not rejected the notion of fees levied by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. It's basically said that it didn't want to see that to be a permanent fixture, but could see that happening temporarily to fund whatever Iran needed to fund with regard to the Strait of Hormuz. For example, minesweeping and other security measures. So, Qatar's been having to maneuver a balance on a tightrope, and for all practical purposes, it's done very well.
So that may be so, but Qatar has 300,000 people. It was an economy largely run by expatriate workers. Many of them have fled. I know many Indian engineers who fled Qatar in terror. Some of them have come back, but many haven't. What does this current conflict portend for Qatar's economy and its ability to draw in both skilled and unskilled labor to power its economy?
Well, I think it all depends on what happens with between the United States and Iran. What clearly, if you got an agreement that was a final agreement, and that people have faith in, I think you'll see the exodus being reversed, and the numbers coming back in. For many, the Gulf is financially a rewarding place to be.
Extremely. I mean,
extremely. And for many, it's also an environment that they appreciate, whether it's culturally, whether it's socially, whether in terms of safety on the streets of Qatari cities. There are many who have valued that, and so if you get a return to a degree of stability, then that the prospect of being dependent on foreign labor is not going to be an issue. Now, you could also get a situation in which you don't get a final agreement, and you get a no war, no peace situation. Again, we've seen that in other parts of the world, and that can prove to be relatively stable too. So, sure, this is obviously cost Qatar significantly, as I mentioned. The cost on the damage to the gas facility.
That's $20 billion a year alone.
$20 billion a year. But let's face it, if anybody can shoulder that kind of cost, it is the Gulf states, and it is a country like Qatar. It's a lot of money. It puts a dent in it, but other countries would be struggling with this. The Gulf may, for political reasons, be demanding compensation for damage done by Iranian attacks. It doesn't need that compensation. I'm not saying it wouldn't welcome it, but it doesn't need it. Iran, on the other hand, does need compensation or support for reconstruction. To be fair, the damage in Iran is far greater, and is as much or is obviously significantly enhanced by the U.S. and Israeli attacks, but damage was already done prior to that because of decades of sanctions.
Yeah. So we are talking about damages. We are talking about the war. Let's talk about the security architecture, the resource architecture that has been appended. We will see the financial architecture, the petrodollar come into question too. We are already seeing it. But the security architecture, wherein the Gulf states relied on America for their security and in turn plowed their dollars into Western assets, is up in question. American security shield failed. The Pakistanis, or didn't succeed as well as it should have. The Pakistanis are now in Saudi Arabia. Where do you see Qatar going? Will Qatar hedge its bets? The UAE has become very close to the West. The UAE the Israelis tell me, is basically a de facto ally now. So I'm curious as to where Qatar goes and what Qatar does for its security.
Well, let me put this in a broader perspective.
Please.
Uh, the the there's no question in my mind
Mhm.
that the United States will remain the guarantor for security in the Gulf.
Mm.
The Gulf states have nowhere else to go. There is no country that is both capable and willing to shoulder that kind of a burden. Now, the United States may or may not want to revise arrangements to some degree. Uh, you know, Trump's famous "I want to get paid for what I do," but there'll be revisions also on the side of the Gulf, including Qatar. They will want to see the U.S. military presence in the region more conditional and more consultative. With other words, not just being informed, but being consulted.
That's
Uh,
a great line. Conditional and consultative.
that's
A
one.
great
I think.
phrase.
I think the second thing that you will see is far greater investment in the defense sector.
Hmm.
Uh, Obviously, already countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE were among the world's biggest arms buyers. Interestingly enough, Qatar has a very different history of that.
Mhm.
If you went back 10, 15 years, maybe 20, and you talk to U.S. defense contractors, what they would tell you is the Qataris always come in, inquire about a major purchase, negotiate a major purchase, but then don't actually make the purchase.
Hmm.
Simply because, as we were discussing earlier, Qatar's main defense strategy was not hardware, it was software or soft power. That's going to change. And I think that will change across the Gulf.
Hmm.
The Gulf states will want a far greater capacity to develop, manufacture their own weapons.
Let me
Their own.
stop you for a second there. They may want to manufacture, but the Gulf states don't have manufacturing muscle outside of oil and gas and, say, aluminium, number one. And let's assume that even if they do manage to manufacture quite a few things, say drones, etc., they don't have the labor. So 300,000 is a very small pool for a military. And so does this mean now that they will employ both workers for the defense industry and soldiers for their militaries?
Well, first of all, they can import labor. Labor's not going to be the issue.
Okay.
You talk about Qatar having 300,000 citizens out of a population of roughly 2 million.
Yeah.
The same is true for the United Arab Emirates.
True.
It's 1.5 million out of a population of 10 million. I think most experts would agree that the most professional, hardened military of the Gulf is that of the UAE.
Yes, that is true.
Now, let's keep in mind the UAE is the only Gulf state that is ruled by a military officer.
Yes.
The Emirati president Mohammed bin Zayed made his career in the military, and he, whatever one thinks of him, does have vision.
Hmm.
So he ensured that the Emirati military, over a number of decades, has been actively involved in peacekeeping missions in Afghanistan. It's you look at Emirati casualties in the Yemen war. A lot of them were Emirati casualties. They were not foreigners serving in the Emirati military.
Hmm.
I think something like 38, if the number is correct. That's a significant number for a population like that.
Hmm.
So in a lot of ways, what that shows, and sure, it's ultimately the question is whether if the Emiratis were on their own against Iran, would they stand a chance? Probably not. But nonetheless, they do prove that there are ways of compensating for lack of population, lack of bodies, uh, and so on. So the ability to build a military-industrial complex exists. You've already seen several years ago the first, and as far as I know, only overseas Chinese defense manufacturing unit is in Saudi Arabia. It's a drone manufacturing facility. And so I think you'll see more of a focus on defense capabilities. I think to what degree you're going to see integration within the Gulf, that's always been a very difficult issue. The Omanis were dead set against that when the Americans were pushing for integrated air missile defense. Um, I think it remains to be seen. It may be that that's something that becomes more palatable now, given the fact that despite whatever differences there are among various Gulf states, there is a common interest in defending the region against external missile attacks. And the fourth thing I think you'll see is diversification. Now, to be fair, sure, the Saudis, as you mentioned, the Saudis and the Pakistanis signed a defense treaty, which has the equivalent of NATO's Article 5 included in it, which is the article that an attack on one is an attack on the other. But let's keep in mind that the Pakistani military presence in Saudi Arabia goes back decades. So basically,
They were there. There were Pakistani troops in 1979 when
yeah,
they stormed the Grand Mosque
yeah, absolutely.
in Mecca. When that was taken, when terrorists took that over and had many hostages and held many hostages. So the Pakistanis have been around for a while, and the current Pakistani president, of course, has served in Saudi Arabia. And one hears from MI6 folks that there was always a deal between the Saudis and Pakistanis for the Saudis to have access to the nuclear bomb. And should the Iranians get a nuclear weapon, the Saudis will have the Pakistani bomb the next day.
Yeah, well,
Not the same
point. The point being that the last year's defense treaty essentially formalized what already existed and took it to the next level. But what I do think you're going to see is greater diversification built around the root of an American military shield in terms of partners. I mean, you see that between the United Arab Emirates and India. You'll see presumably partnerships with European countries that already exist, like Britain, like France, being expanded. I think you'll see some degree of cooperation with China, potentially even Russia. So and I think that you will see, but that will take time and will be very complicated, discussions about a regional security architecture that's inclusive. So, in other words, that includes Iran. I mean, at the end of the day, Iran and the Gulf states, including Qatar, have a Catholic marriage, which is dictated by geography. There is no divorce.
I've never heard anyone say it better. That's a brilliant way of summing the situation up.
Thank you. Thank you. So they have to find a modus vivendi, and they know it.
Yeah.
You see already traces of that in the discussion about the future of the Strait of Hormuz,
Yeah,
where the
but this is
suggestion
this.
where the suggestion is not only that there would be a discussion or that there are discussions between Iran and Oman about the future management of the strait, but also with the Gulf states. So you're seeing already the very first initial steps in this. I think the problem that the Gulf states feel is that, at least up until this point, Iran comes out of this conflict emboldened.
Mhm.
It may have been militarily weakened. In other words, it may be down, but it is by no stretch of the imagination out. It may have been economically weakened, but then again, if it gets the release of its frozen assets, if it gets the lifting of the sanctions, if it gets whatever figure, $300 billion, whatever it may be, a reconstruction fund, then the economic losses will be compensated for. So Iran ultimately comes at this point out of this conflict strengthened. It's no longer about survival of the regime. The regime has survived. I think that the regime probably understands that the grievances that many in Iran have and that brought them onto the streets in significant numbers in December and January continue to exist, may have been put on the back burner for now, as many rallied around the flag, but are certain to come back. And the government, certainly Pezeshkian, the president, has shown that he is sensitive to that. And there's a history in Iran of this kind of situation. So if you go back to the presidency of Hashim Rafsanjani in the 1990s or 1980s, that
I think
divide.
wasn't it 90s? Because 80s was the Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Rafsanjani comes after that.
Yeah, it was the 1990s.
Yeah.
If you look at that period, Rafsanjani was obviously a much stronger figure politically and otherwise, but nonetheless, he was the Pezeshkian, if you wish, of that era. His emphasis was on social and economic, not on military ideology, what have you. So, Iran's been here before. It's not new, and I would assume, certainly if they have any brains, that they've demonstrated to have those, that they're very well aware that the fight doesn't end when the guns fall silent.
Yeah.
But coming back to this whole thing, this is an Iran that is emboldened by its success, its political success in this war, and that's going to manifest itself in the way it approaches relations, security architecture in the region. Now, the last thing I'll say on this is there are all kinds of issues. It's very hard to see the Iranians engage in a regional security architecture that involves U.S. bases in the region. It's very hard to see Iran engage, and I say this very deliberately this way, engage in a security architecture that includes Israel without a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the reason I say this is Iran's position is interpreted, and there's the rhetoric to prove it, there's no question about it, that Iran wants the destruction of the state of Israel and won't compromise on anything less. However, if you look in practice, and I don't see Iranian support for Hamas as by definition meaning the destruction of the state of Israel. But if you look at other examples, the bottom line of the Iranian position has been, we'll accept whatever the Palestinians accept. So if you go back, as one example, to the November 2023 Arab and Islamic Summit in Riyadh, in which Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, participated, the final statement of that summit, a month into the Gaza war, reaffirmed support for a two-state solution. Iran signed that declaration.
So, very quickly, last question for you. Joseph Olmert, whom you've heard of, who's a regular author, he interviews very regularly with me, said that Iran has won. Strategically, it has won because it has survived. The regime has survived. The regime has held the global economy ransom. And the US has backed down. And I have said that, and I said it yesterday to Gary Grappo, our former chair, who is a celebrated retired US diplomat, that for me, the 2026 Hormuz crisis for the US is like the 1956 Suez crisis for the UK. And this is bad news in more ways than one for Israel.
First of all, I think at this point, Iran has won. I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, it's going to depend on these negotiations between the US and Iran. Mm-hmm. You take that memorandum of understanding, mm-hmm. and essentially, if you want to put it in World Cup terms, it's Iran 1, United States 0. Or if you want to express it differently, it's Iran got everything it wanted, mm-hmm. Trump got what he had. Now, having said all of that, we're very early in the stages of the negotiations, and even with the principles, and that's all it is in that memorandum of understanding, there is a wide gap on what that means. Mm-hmm.
The two sides interpret the same thing completely differently.
We're already seeing that with the issue of International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors returning to Iran. We're seeing that in terms of whether or not there are conditions attached to release of Iranian funds and what Iran may or may not be able to do with that. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
So watch this space.
Yeah, but that also means that what is a victory now potentially is also reversible, depending on what happens. The last thing I'll say on this is, I've seen the comparison with the Suez Canal. I've written about the comparison with the Suez Canal. One difference, of course, is the Gulf cannot walk away from the United States. Britain could walk away from the Gulf, and the Gulf could walk away from Britain. So, to some degree, I think that
is overblown.
Well, not overblown. Let's say it's a comparison that hinks. And ultimately, the last thing I'll say on this: the United States has done extreme damage to itself, and it's damage that is compounded by the way it's handled relations with Europe, the way it's handling Latin America, even though we're seeing a rise of the right in Latin America, the whole issue over Greenland. None of that is irreparable. Mm-hmm. It may not be easy to be repaired, but it's not irreparable.
Mm-hmm. Hello? Excellent. So very quickly, James, Qatar on the whole, as you said, will invest in military, going back to the topic of our discussion. It'll diversify its security partners. There'll be others involved. It'll still rely on the US. It cannot really walk away from the US. And it considering all things, has done quite well. So Qatar's situation is certainly more perilous than what it was before. But on the whole, Qatar has the cash, Qatar has the diplomatic knowledge, sophistication, and experience to survive this tricky phase. Would that be a fair summary?
That's a fair summary, but I think that also applies to a number of other Gulf states. I mean,
I
it's true
see.
for Saudi Arabia. It's true for the United Arab Emirates. Bahrain may be somewhat more strapped. It's true for Kuwait. So I think in that sense, you're going to see more uniformity in those kind of steps, even if you're going to see somewhat differing policies, as you see between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. But by and large, you're going to see a degree of uniformity in many of those responses to the Iran war.
Brilliant. James Dorsey, thank you very, very much for your time, and we'll have you back. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.